Is social media bad for you? Well, there's been a lot of speculation. For years now, the toll social platforms like Instagram and Facebook take on mental health have been examined. But a recent research study went a step further and looked at whether a so-called detox from social media can actually improve people's well-being. Researchers at the National Bureau of Economic Research conducted the largest randomized experiment to find out. Joining us now to discuss the findings is Hunt Allcott, a professor at Stanford University and a member of the research team. Hunt, thank you for joining us, and let's jump right in. What exactly did you find about the impact that social media can have on a person's well-being?
We estimated that quitting Facebook or Instagram for the 5 weeks before the 2020 election increased an index of people's happiness, anxiety, and depression.
Hunt, as you looked at this research and you saw what the effect was on that detox, I'm struck by the reality that adults, are just as addicted to social media as kids are. We often think about it as a kid's problem, but adults are really the ones often scrolling. It's parents, it's grandparents, it's everybody. But kids have these formative minds, where this stuff may be affecting them differently. Did you dissect at all the difference between how an adult can benefit by some of this detox versus how you can set boundaries for kids in a way that does not increase the likelihood of addiction?
Our study included only people who were 18 and over. And
Yeah.
so our study says nothing directly about folks under 18. What we did see in our study is that, because we have a variety of people from as young as 18 to much older than that, we can look at the subgroups of people who are relatively young versus relatively old in our sample. And for Instagram in particular, we found that the improvements in happiness, anxiety, and depression that we saw from quitting Instagram were particularly strong for young women. And I think that is consistent with some of the concerns that people have had about how Instagram may play a role in negative body image issues.
And you noted in the study that one of the problems with keeping people appropriately randomized in terms of the decline of usage or lack of usage on Facebook and Instagram was that a lot of them just went to other apps and started using those more on their phone or computers. Have you considered doing a follow-up study where they do a full digital detox and seeing the impacts of that?
We have actually done such a study before.
Great.
We have
Tell me
another
about
paper
it.
that was published in 2022. It was called Digital Addiction. And there we actually paid people to use less of a whole suite of 6 social media apps: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, web browsers, and YouTube. And there we found that it was quite interesting, actually. People told us in advance we would like to use less social media. And then when we gave people access to time limiting apps on their phones that allow them to set in advance, I want to use less social media, that actually substantially reduced their social media use. And there was some indication in the data that that improved people's sense of subjective well-being.
And Hunt, on that point, do you think that there's a general acceptance, although we are addicted and we can't put the phones down, we can't put them away, we can't stop scrolling, is there a social license perhaps to create some boundaries, regulatory boundaries, whether it's on the apps themselves or in certain, physical locations, or for kids or young adults who are just, forming their opinions on the world? Are those boundaries acceptable to people? Do they want to be regulated, in other words?
There's a great recent study that was done by some other researchers that showed that if you survey people, many people will say, I would like to individually keep using social media, but if I could get everybody else to quit, then I would also like to quit, and I think everybody would be better off. And so this is what you might call a collective action problem. And so I think this raises some questions around whether, if at a higher societal level, we might actually benefit people overall if we could somehow reduce everybody's attachment to our smartphones. And so I think this raises important questions for example, school administrators. Our research team, with Angela Duckworth and Matthew Jensko, we're doing some work trying to understand the benefits and costs and overall impacts of banning smartphone use in schools. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that's awesome. I'd love to hear the results of that. We'll have to have you back to discuss it. Final question for you. We've seen Instagram recently introduce this teen-friendly account, they call it, where it limits who they're able to DM and what content they're able to see. Do you foresee perhaps other social media companies jumping on this trend in response to the public concern about usage, particularly for young people, and maybe limiting other features like endless scroll or some of the more addictive functions of their apps?
My sense is that all of the social media companies are interested in doing as good of a job as possible for their users, and then at the same time, they are constrained by the fact that, they're businesses that need to raise ad revenue through increasing user engagement. And I think that's the key tension that all these companies face. As they think about these sorts of policies, I think there are various types of things they're considering. One is the content that flows through the platform and who you can communicate with, which I think is part of what you were referring to. And then there's a separate question of just like whether we're spending a lot of time on our smartphones, which is about social media use, which is about all sorts of the other apps on our smartphones, and whether in the process of doing that, we are losing track of all the great things that are happening in the world in front of us.
Well, thank you, Hunt, for coming on and helping us break down your research. Really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, next on Rising, we'll get to the feisty encounter between a reporter from the Daily Caller News Foundation and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.